But it's again, it just tells the story of it's the evil and the ugliness of people's hearts these days is everywhere.
This is Frankie Rose's Think Tank. Here's your host, Frankie Rose.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Think Tank. Oh, it's been a busy morning, hasn't it? So we are going to be looking at part 11 of Ethan Crumbley's Miller hearing. So let's see here. There we go. Dun, 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 dun. Okay, let's check it out and see what we can learn this morning. This one's about an hour and a half.
All rise. Oakland County Circuit Court is now in session with the Honorable Kwame Rowe presiding.
Thank you. Good morning. You may all be seated.
Your Honor, Klein People versus Ethan Crumbley, case number 279506 FC.
Thank you and good morning, counsel. Appearances for the record.
Good morning, Your Honor. Karen McDonald on behalf of the people of the state of Michigan.
Thank you, Mark Case on behalf of the people.
Good morning, Your Honor. David Williams on behalf of the people.
Paulette Michelle Lofton on behalf of Ethan Crumbley.
Amy Happ on behalf of Ethan Crumbley. Good morning, Your Honor. Deborah McKelvey on behalf of Ethan Crumbley.
Thank you and good morning to all counsel. You may all be seated. Defense ready to proceed with your next witness?
Yes, if I could just have a moment to connect the PowerPoint, please.
Absolutely.
I think we should begin.
There is so much in these
Time to call
hearings.
Dr. Colin King to the stand.
Thank you. Doctor, you're going to approach the witness stand. You're going to stand in the witness box, face my clerk to be sworn, please.
Please raise your right hand. Under penalty of perjury, do you swear or affirm the statements you're about to make to this court will be the whole truth?
I do.
Thank you. Please have a seat.
Thank you and good morning, sir. If you could, please state your full name for the record and spell your last name.
Sure. My name is Colin King. C is in Charlie. Olin. Last name King. King.
Thank you. Defense your witness.
Thank you. Dr. King, I'll let you get situated. Let me know when you're ready. All set?
I am ready.
Okay. Doctor, what is your highest qualification for education?
I have a PhD in counseling psychology
And where did you obtain your degree?
from Wayne State University in Detroit, Michigan.
What licenses do you hold?
I am a fully licensed psychologist, and I'm also licensed as a professional counselor, so I'm dually licensed.
What certifications do you have?
So I'm certified as a board forensic counselor, a board certified sentence mitigation specialist, a certified advanced addiction specialist.
Have you ever had your license revoked or suspended?
No, ma'am.
Where did you do your internship?
So I did my internship in Michigan City, Indiana, and that's at a psychiatric hospital that treats children, adolescents, and adults. And then I did a second internship at Southwest Detroit Community Mental Health, working with patients with chronic mental health issues and polysubstance abuse.
Your Honor, just for the record, it appears the witness is consulting some documents. Could we just identify what those are?
Thank you, sir. What do you have that's currently with you on the witness stand?
Sure, I submitted a copy of my CV.
Thank you. And is that what you're referring to?
Yes, yes.
People, do you have a copy of the CD?
Yes, Your Honor. He's got a whole binder. I just want to make sure I understand what he's consulting.
Yeah, I can absolutely tell you what is in my binder, sir.
Sure. There's no need, sir. If you could please set the binder aside and let's specifically ask to refer to it.
Okay.
Thank you. You may proceed.
Absolutely. Your resume indicates that you also lectured at a number of universities. Can you describe that?
Yes, so as an adjunct professor, I've lectured at Wayne State, Eastern Michigan University, Ashland University, and University of Detroit, Mercy.
And what courses did you teach there?
I taught classes in multicultural issues and psychological testing.
You also worked as a special education consultant, is that correct?
That is correct.
And what did you do there?
I consult with one of the charter schools in Michigan, doing IEPs and psychological testing.
You also have listed that you are a brain injury expert. Can you tell me about your experience treating brain injury and or mental illness?
Absolutely. So I've worked with a large Midwestern brain injury facility, actually one of the largest in Michigan. And over the last maybe 23 years or so, I have treated various forms of brain injuries, mental illness, and patients with polysubstance abuse. In fact, I was tasked as a part of my assignments, tasked with supervising teams of occupational therapists, physical therapists, nurses, and psychologists. I've traveled to different states and met with neurologists and assessed patients who were injured due to maybe auto accident or spinal cord injury or stroke. Had an opportunity to look at their medical records and review their records with physicians, and then returned back to Michigan and set up treatment programs for them. I also traveled to Loma Linda University, which is one of the largest, which has one of the largest.
You might want to crank up your volume for this one because he is hard to hear.
Cadaver labs in the nation, and had an opportunity to meet with a neuropathologist and got a chance to look at various models of the brain, to handle the brain and to see how it works. I've also attended various lectures at the Amen clinics, and you may know he is the award winner on Change Your Brain, Change Your Life. I actually had my own brain scanned, and so that gives me my experience in brain injury.
Have you ever testified at any juvenile life cases before?
I have.
In what counties?
Wayne, Macomb, Genesee, and I think Jackson.
In the last 3 years, approximately how many juvenile lifers, homicide, or competency cases have you testified in?
Probably about 24, 25.
Have you been previously qualified as an expert?
Yes, ma'am.
Your Honor, at this time, I move to have Dr. Colin King as an expert in mental health, forensic psychology, and brain injury.
Judge, I understand he's interviewed. I'm sorry, may I, Judge?
Yes.
I understand that he's interviewed the defendant and he's here as a mitigation specialist. I don't have any issue with that. There's nothing in his report or in the record to indicate that this defendant had any kind of brain injury. So I would object to his qualification on that simply because it's not relevant to this proceeding.
Thank you. As it relates to any brain injury, unless there's going to be foundation laid that physically has brain injury, that's not appropriate. However, I will qualify this witness as an expert in mental health and forensic psychology. Is that correct?
That is correct.
He is so qualified.
Thank you. And Your Honor, we do have a demonstrative PowerPoint to explain his report. All right, so I want to go over the process that was taken. Is it working? Oh, yeah. Just go to the next one. So let's start with the process. It is my understanding that you became involved in this case in December of 2022. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
All right. And can you tell me what you did first?
So I spent approximately 23 to 24 hours testing Ethan Crumbley over about 6 sessions. And I used about 15 different assessments. And
I just barely hear him.
Report, which is about a 6 to 9 to 70 page report.
Okay. Some of the testing, was it done in person?
Yes, yes, ma'am.
And then some of the testing, was it done on computer or by Zoom?
It was done virtually. Yes, ma'am.
So you interviewed him multiple times, approximately 1 year after the incident, a little bit longer than 1 year. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Were you also given a litany of records, videos, text messages, and reports to review?
Yes, ma'am.
Did you then do research to gather data and establish the standards that are required?
I did.
Here we also have that you consulted with a Dr. Malcolm Court, that is a sociologist. Why is it important to peer review?
Well, because I wanted a different discipline to look at my work and to provide me feedback on my work. I wanted to make sure that it was not just my personal opinion, but that my work was based on testing and solid scientific evidence.
And Your Honor, I'll draw your attention to Exhibit O, the CV of Dr. Malcolm Court, and Exhibit P, the report of Dr. Malcolm Court, which reviews Dr. King's findings.
Thank you.
You want to move to the next one?
Judge, if I may, I believe we stipulated the admission of exhibits with the understanding Dr. Court was a witness. And so I had some questions for Dr. Court, and now what it sounds like is he's not going to testify. So I have an issue with the court using his report as a basis, as evidence in this case, without the chance to cross-examine.
So Dr. Court was not listed on my witness list. I did have conversations with Mr. Keese, the fact that Mr. Court would not be called. This should not be a surprise at all. And they did not object to my exhibits.
Okay. Judge, I'll do with this to weight of the evidence to the court to consider. Thank you.
Thank you. The court will apply the appropriate weight, noting that the doctor will not be testifying.
Thank you. So as a brief overview, what is it that you looked at in regards to this case to form an opinion?
Sure. So I looked at Ethan's early life. I looked at the parental influences and activities. I looked at the Oxford school system, testing results, events leading up to the shooting, the day of shooting, and a review of mental illness.
I'll move to the next one. All right, so let's talk about early childhood experiences. Can you discuss that?
Absolutely.
Again, Your Honor, he's consulting
He has the
something.
PowerPoint.
Okay, it's simply the PowerPoint.
Yeah, this is an exact copy.
Let me step in. Anytime you're referring to something on the witness stand, the parties need to be aware of what you're looking at. And so you just can't just pick something up and start reviewing it. First, the defense attorney or the prosecutor has to prompt you to look at something. So what are you currently looking at, sir?
I have an exact copy of the PowerPoint that is on the screen, sir.
Thank you. And that's the only thing that you're looking at right now?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you. You may continue.
Thank you. All right, so let's start again. Early childhood experiences. What did you come across when examining all of the evidence and discussing the matter with Mr. Crumbley?
Certainly, in my review of the records, I saw that as early as age 10, matter of fact, even going back to age 6, there were some issues. I interviewed a neighbor, and looking at the records, which were corroborated, is that he was left unattended as early as age 6. He would go across to the neighbor's house, especially when there was like a thunder shower, and reported that he was afraid and would ask for help. And they would ask him where were his parents, and his response was, "I don't know." In the records, at age 10, there's text messages between Ethan and his mom saying to her, "When are you going to come home?" And there were no responses. In my interview with Ethan, he explained that he spent countless hours watching various adult games. Some of them are in my report, and Assassin's Creed, Grand Theft Auto, and he also spent an inordinate amount of time going to different websites and indulging in various graphic scenes, and indicated after a while he began to fantasize about being part of those scenes. So he sort of lost track of reality.
You also have listed trauma. What is trauma?
Trauma is sort of an insult to the person, an insult to the brain. So it could be as a result of parental discord. It could be as a result of high levels of anxiety or high levels of depression. Anything that insults the person's brain can be classified as trauma.
What about constant stress from parents fighting?
Yes, parental dysfunction, constant and intense dysfunction, can induce trauma. In my interview with Ethan and in a review of the records also, there's frequent references to either parent threatening to commit suicide. And on some occasions, Ethan has had to be the one intervening at such a young age.
What about the loss of a grandparent or the loss of an animal, especially in a violent death?
Absolutely. Ethan disclosed that one of his sort of soulmate was a large dog that he had cherished, and it died at home, and he was the one tasked with having to remove it and take it back to the shed and figure out how to dispose of it.
And you saw the Google searches where he actually is looking how to dispose of a dog that has passed away. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, that is correct.
What about the loss of a best friend?
The loss of a best friend and perhaps your only friend could be a pretty traumatic experience, as in the case of Ethan. And as seen in the record, he spent hours and hours communicating with his best friend and pouring out his heart and disclosing what was happening to him.
Were you also told what his mother told him when that friend went away to a rehab?
Yes, ma'am.
And what was that?
She told him that he would probably never see his friend again.
All right, let's move on. Dr. Keating, when he testified last week, touched on ACEs. Can you explain what that is to the court?
Yes, so I think in 1995 and 97, my year could be off, the CDC and Kaiser commissioned a study where they looked at 17,000 people, and they have established what is called ACEs, or adverse childhood experiences. And what the research,
I'm surprised they're not asking him to speak up just a little bit. I wonder, I don't know. I wonder if they hear him properly.
researchers saw was that between the ages of 0 to 18, children exposed to abuse, physical or emotional, mental, parental dysfunction, or incarceration, the more ACEs someone has, the more likely they are to have mental health issues. In fact, what the researchers discovered is that with 6 or more ACEs, the probability of that person dying 20 years earlier than their peer is greatly improved.
And were you able to find a number of these factors when you interviewed Ethan as well as reviewed the records?
Yes, ma'am.
In a number of our conversations, you had discussed a feral child. What is a feral child?
So a feral child, and I would love to read the definition if I can.
If you can give us the definition, that would be fine.
Certainly. It's essentially a child who has been abandoned. Initially, this phenomenon was known as someone who is abandoned physically. But then there is an emotional and a psychological construct to it. So what the researchers saw is that someone who is abandoned has what is called arrested development. Hence, they lack social skills, they lack social awareness, they lack social cues, and essentially become misfits in society.
And
That's
why
sad.
do you feel that this is relevant in your review of this case?
So when I interviewed Ethan and just looked at his profile, at his high level of isolation, lack of parental support, lack of guidance, lack of resources. So psychologically and socially, he can be considered a feral child.
You also had the opportunity to review some text messages between Ethan's parents, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And Your Honor, just for your notes, it is Exhibit F.
Thank you.
I apologize, Exhibit G. And in those text messages, were you able to see where they were discussing situations that Ethan was going through as early as March or even October of 2020?
Yes.
And what did those text messages show you?
So, very clear indication that his parents were not in tune to what was going on with him. In this string of text messages, he actually woke up in their room one day, and the mom and dad they were exchanging text messages, and they were sort of joking that Ethan was asking, "What am I doing in you guys' role?" And one of the text messages stated that he seemed to be under the influence of substances. And one parent asked the other, "Did you give him one of your Xanax?" And she said, "No, melatonin."
Okay. So do those text messages show that Ethan was experiencing things that his parents at least were observing at this point?
Yes, ma'am.
All right, let's move to part 2, which is the parental influences and activities. I know that we touched on things that Ethan reported, the threats of suicide made in front of Ethan. What else did you find that was interesting under this section?
So under this section, Ethan witnessed just a litany of verbal abuse, frequent taunts, and I guess the part that sort of stood out for me was when he told his parents that he was hearing voices and he needed to see a therapist. I don't know what 50-year-old raises his hand and says, my brain hurts, I need to see a therapist. And it never happened.
What did you find out about the purchase of the gun and then going to the shooting range?
So there seemed to have been discord between his parents. I think his dad bought the gun out of spite. And then his mom took him to the shooting range out of spite because they were arguing. So there was constant just discord and family dysfunction.
And in your interview with Ethan, did he report that he was ever taken to any sort of doctor to deal with this?
In my review of the record, there was no indication that he was ever taken to a doctor.
In your interviews and your discussion with him about the constant situations that were going on, was there constant arguments about divorce and which parent that Ethan would?
You know, that's the thing. The parents were so busy doing what they were doing that it's almost like they didn't have the time for him. It's sad. I mean, from what I've been seeing, just epic fail as far as their parenting. How did they know? How did they not know? I don't get it. I don't get it.
Choose.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, can you explain that a little bit?
So yes, there was frequent just harsh discussions about infidelity,
Yeah.
suicide, and which parent Ethan needed to choose to live with when they separate or the event that they separate.
Were you able to look at the text messages between Ethan and his friend over the months leading up to November?
I did.
All right. And what's the significance that you found with those text messages?
So in reviewing those text messages, let me just say, Ethan had no idea that these text messages were going to be made public. And so he was having private conversations with his friend. And in one of his text messages, which is on their screen, he says that my mom thinks I'm taking drugs, but she doesn't worry about my mental health. In another of the text messages on the screen, he said, I have an effing breakdown in the shower. And in the text messages also, he said, from what my mom said last night, I went outside in my shorts and I have no recollection of that event. And in another text message on your screen, he said to his friend, I am hallucinating. And he said, I hear like people talking to me. These were actual text messages back and forth between himself and his friend.
I want to move next to part 3, which is the Oxford school system. Were you able to take a look at the counseling that was available to Ethan at the school, as well as the reports surrounding the school's interaction with Ethan the day prior and the day of the incident?
Can you repeat that question?
Sure. Were you able to look at Oxford school system and their counseling program, as well as the interaction that the school system had with him the day before, as well as the day of the incident?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And can you explain what you found?
So what I found was that in terms of the available resources for intervention, it did not appear to me from my review of the information that he was afforded any type of mental health assistance.
Okay. I'm gonna move to the next one. You also mention in your report implicit bias. What is that?
So implicit bias is, it's sort of like the unconscious forces. You know, I can use an analogy of a peanut butter jar, which is actually on one of their slides. And so a child learns how to use peanut butter from a jar because the child is taught by the parent how to do that. They learn how to unscrew and cork and unscrew the peanut butter jar to get peanut from their peanut butter. So after a while, they learn it so well that they're able to do it unconsciously. The grooves on that bottle represent the grooves that society grooves us with, so that we have certain perception of things and people. Well, that's how implicit bias works. Let me give you another quick example. I was in court in Detroit and about to step into the elevator, and there was an attorney and other people. I was dressed in suit and tie, and the attorney turned to me and said, "Counsel, come on in." I'm not an attorney, but he made the assumption based on how I was dressed and how I comported myself that I was an attorney. Well, that's how implicit bias works. So it's not necessarily a bad thing nor a good thing. It's a thing, but it can have deadly consequences if it's not used appropriately.
Okay. Now, you also stated that you had a chance to look at the resources that were available to any high school student at Oxford High School. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And is there a rubric or is there a standard that is required for a school to have counselors, to have support staff, or to be able to help the students when they have issues?
Certainly. So the American School Counseling Association, known as ASCA, this is sort of like the monitoring body that makes recommendation in terms of social worker to student ratio. So the recommendation is that there be minimum one social worker to about 250 students. And what that body says is that if you have a ratio of one social worker to 1,000 students, you are not even getting into the classroom.
Okay. Were you able to find the data, and I know that it's contained in your report, regarding Oxford in the year prior and the year of the incident?
Certainly.
Okay. And Your Honor, just because they're numbers, I ask if it's okay that he refer to his notes just to get the numbers correct.
Thank you. Any objection?
No, yeah.
Thank you. You may, sir.
So in the 2019-2020 school year, what was the social worker to student ratio in Oxford?
So it was approximately one social worker to about 1,000 students.
What about 2020 to 2021?
It was 1 to 1 social worker to about 900 students.
And then what about 2021 to 2022?
It was about 1 to about 900 students.
So you went even a step further to look at suspensions and expulsions. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And what were your findings?
So in my research in the Oxford school system, just in terms of raw data, I saw that whites comprised about 80% of the school district's enrollment, and blacks comprised, I think, about just under 5%, and Hispanics about 12%, which is reflective, I believe, of the society. So there was nothing revealing about that. However, when you begin now to disaggregate the data, because data tells you something, so that when you begin to disaggregate it, you see a pattern which is visible on your screen. So whites, 80% enrollment, and in terms of suspensions, 68% of the students suspended were whites. Blacks, enrollment, 5%. Suspension, 12%. Let's look at expulsions.
Mhm.
Again, whites, 80% of the population. Expulsions, 44%. So about half. Blacks, 5% of the population. Expulsions, 22%. Hispanics, think about 12% of the population. Expulsions, 22%. What this data is telling you is very significant, is that all the students are suspended or expelled at a disproportionate rate when considered to the majority population. And then when you dig a little deeper, you have to ask yourself, what are we missing? And as it pertains to Ethan, as you will see, is that the students are not subject to the same degree of rigor, which is why implicit bias is so important.
Okay. And can you explain, just so it's clear, how implicit bias ties into these findings?
Absolutely, because if you believe that a student is not a problem, you are less likely to pay attention to that student. Even if you are shown overwhelming evidence about problems, implicit bias says, you give this person a pass because that's how you've been groomed. You make certain assumptions. So you give certain people a pass based on your assumptions. However, if you give a person a pass who is a problem, it creates a bigger issue.
Okay. So I want to go into.
You know what? That makes total sense. I mean, it's sad, but it does make sense. You know, you are preconditioned when you're pretty young to think certain ways.
A little bit of what you call a pass. You were shown a number of assignments that were found in Ethan's backpack, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
And you would agree with me that, in Your Honor, these exhibits can be found in Exhibit C.
Thank you.
There is a number of pieces of paper with guns, with bullets, and other alarming scenes drawn on them. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Okay. I know the prosecutor made mention that we aren't 100% certain that these were seen by teachers, but they were in his backpack and are school assignments, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you also able to look at emails between the teachers the day before this incident as well as the day of the incident, discussing the things that had come to light from the teachers, trying to give warning to the people in the office?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And Your Honor, that's also found in Exhibit C.
Thank you.
And what did those emails show to you, or how do they tie into implicit bias?
So just looking at the emails, I was, just red flags went up. One teacher said, and it's on their screen as an exhibit. And this is from Miss Krupinski. She said, I know Jackie emailed you guys yesterday with some concerns about Ethan Crumbley in our first hour class. Today, he's watching videos on his phone and a guy gunning down people. It looks like it's a movie scene and not security footage, a real event, but definitely still concerning when taking into account some of his behaviors. I continue. And this is from Ms. Kubini. I had a student doing first hour, Ethan Crumbley, who was on his phone looking at different bullets at the end of first hour today. As I was walking around the room passing out their essays, I didn't get a chance to investigate it a bit further since it was at the end of the hour. Now that he's on my radar, I'm also noticing that some of his previous work that he completed from early in the year lean a bit toward the violent side. I can bring these things later today during my 5th prep hour.
And we can tell the time on that email is 9:33 a.m., correct?
Yes.
Okay. The assignment that Ms. Kubina is talking about, you had a chance to look at, and it's contained as well in my exhibit. It's a note card where a gun was erased, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And there is also a drawing of a person with an arm outstretched with the gun, correct?
That is correct.
All right. So I want to get into the brain and mental illness. You can go to the next one. What is mental illness?
So it's a substantial disorder of thought or mood.
This is pretty disturbing. You know, so many things. If just one person had done something a little bit different, this might not have happened. There were so many people who could have caught this.
That significantly impairs judgment, behavior, and the capacity to recognize reality. Mental illness is actually a symptom of a deeper problem. So, for example, if someone has a chest pain is a symptom of a deeper problem. It could be a pulled muscle, or it could be because of a heart attack. So mental illness is a sign of brain dis-ease.
So there are multiple ways to study the brain, is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Can you briefly discuss those different ways?
Certainly. So one way is to look at the brain directly. So cardiologists look at the heart, dentists look at the teeth, and mental health people should look directly at the brain through various brain imaging techniques which are available. So that's one way. A second way is you want to test the brain directly through psychological instruments. Then a third way is what is utilized by psychiatrists and psychologists, and that is they use symptom clusters. So for example, if someone comes to me and they say, for the last month or so, I've not been sleeping well, I've not been eating well, I've been skipping out on work, I've been crying, I've been sad and blue, then I go to the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, the DSM, and I look at symptoms. And if the person has, for example, 5 of these 8 symptoms, then I can diagnose that person like with major depressive disorder. So that's the third way of looking at the brain. And then the last one really is not appropriate, and that is that you guess. So what you do, you say, well, because I see you acting in this way, and because you can plan, and because you can execute, and because you can do these things, I know that you're not ill or don't have a brain dysfunction. That is guessing.
So were you able to actually look at Ethan's brain directly through imaging?
I was not able to.
Okay. So did you then decide to test the brain using assessment tools and perform a number of testing?
Yes, that is correct.
We'll go to the next one. Can you explain to us the brain and exactly how easy it is for the brain to be damaged in a variety of ways?
Absolutely. So,
Judge, I'd just like some foundation. No, I'm sorry, Judge. I'd like some foundation for this area. There's just no evidence in the record that this defendant suffered any brain damage.
Thank you. Please lay more foundation.
Absolutely. Were you able to view a video taken at the 5-1 diner?
yes, I did.
Okay. And in that video, actually, we'll go ahead and play it now
So
since
what
it's
I would like to
Sure.
emphasize.
1 second. She has to ask a question. I can't interrupt.
sure. So were you able to, in your discussions with Ethan and the evidence that you were presented, were you able to, or did you have some concern that an injury to the brain could have occurred based on what he reported as a child and what you saw in this video?
Yes,
Okay. Let's go ahead and play the video. This is my Exhibit R. There is no sound in this video. So this is from 2020. What did you observe on this video?
So I observed Ethan walking in the diner, and for some inexplicable reason, his head takes a direct hit to the floor, and observed him trying to get up on his own volition, but he was not able to. And as we know, the brain is very soft. It has the consistency of soft butter or raw egg. And it's housed in this very hard box called the skull that has very sharp ridges. The brain is very susceptible to injury, and I would love to do a demonstration with your permission.
Sure, Your Honor, he has a demonstration to show with an egg as he described how exactly, how soft the brain is and how.
I'm sorry, someone was just approaching
Yes,
without asking permission. I'm sorry, what exactly are you trying to do?
Yes, Your Honor, my witness would like to demonstrate to the court how easy it is, as he described, the brain is like a raw egg inside of the skull. He would like to demonstrate to the court how easy it is, even a fall like this, to damage the inside of the brain.
People, any objection?
Judge, I guess I just wonder what the basis of that testimony is. It sounds like it's just Dr. King telling us, and the idea that it's the consistency of an egg. I see it in his report without citing anything. So like some foundation that this is not just Dr. King's theory.
Thank you. Respectfully, your argument goes to the weight of this demonstrative evidence, and so the court will apply the appropriate weight. You may approach the witness.
And can you demonstrate, since obviously this is a video courtroom and we're recording, can you demonstrate or discuss what you're going to demonstrate?
Absolutely. So as I previously mentioned,
Sir, you can be seated because I can't see what you're doing.
my apologies, Your Honor. So as I mentioned, it's 100 billion neurons and 1 trillion connections in the brain. And this is scientific evidence. This is not my opinion. This is how the human brain is engineered. And it has the consistency of soft butter or raw egg. I've had the opportunity to visit the lab in Loma Linda. I have handled the human brain, and I've seen how the human brain works and how it looks like. It has the consistency of an egg. Ethan is about 6 feet 2 inches tall. And this is not 6 feet 2 inches. This probably is about, I don't know, 2 feet.
Before you move on, sir, please do not. Are you going to drop this egg in the courtroom? Thank you. I can't see.
I'm sorry, Your Honor.
Thank you. Thank you. You may proceed, sir.
Now, it makes it difficult for me if I don't stand, Your Honor.
Thank you. You can stand now. I just can't see over this bar here, so I can't see what's below your chest area. So you may stand so that way I can see what you're doing.
So Ethan is 6'2", and this is less than 2 feet. That's a human brain. The reason why our brains don't collapse when we have an injury is because the brain is housed in this hard shell called the skull. This skull protects the brain from external injuries.
So besides the incident that we saw at the 5-1 diner, did he also make you aware of other circumstances where he hit his head or even blacked out?
Yes.
Can you describe that?
Yeah. Ethan disclosed that he was out with his parents. I think they were picking strawberries or doing something like that. And he fell, and all he remembered was regaining consciousness. And he asked his parents what happened. And they said that he had taken a blow to the head. And there is no indication that he was taken to the emergency room or received medical assistance.
In regards to the 5-1 diner video, you were shown a report where the owner was interviewed. And in fact, his parents told the owner to not call 911 after that fall. Is that your understanding?
Yes, that is correct.
And in your interview with Ethan, did he ever tell you that at some point following that he was taken to the hospital or taken to the doctor to see, one, why he fell, or two, what happened from the fall?
I saw no evidence of that.
Let's move on. Let's go through a couple of these more quickly.
Makes me wonder if you had like a goosebump or something from hitting that. That was an interesting demonstration. Didn't look like the judge was impressed.
Let's go to part 4. So keep clicking. We're going to move along to part 4, which is Ethan's testing. Can you explain to the court the tests that you performed with Ethan?
Certainly. So I performed 15 different types of tests. And I wanted to, because there was an opportunity to image his brain, so I wanted to test his brain to see what his brain is like. And so there are a list of 15 tests here on the screen in my report.
Okay, let's go through them. The evaluation of competency to stand trial. Why was this important?
It was important because this is a test that is affirmed by that is recognized, I should say, by the U.S. Supreme Court in Dusky versus the people in 1960. And it essentially looks at 3 things. Does the person have the ability to consult with their attorney? Does the person have the ability to rationally understand the proceedings of the court? Does the person have a factual understanding of the proceedings of the court? And the reason why I administer this test is because I know that sometimes inmates feign or they fake. They try to pretend that something is going on when that is not the case. So when I administer this test, anything below 60 is normal, indicating that Ethan approached this test in an honest and open manner. In other words, he was not feigning. He didn't know the questions that pertain to feigning.
Okay. And what were the results?
He does have the ability to consult with his attorney. He does understand the charges against him, and he does have a factual understanding of the charges.
Okay, let's move on to the next test, the mini mental status examination. What is that?
It's a test that has essentially 30 questions, and it tests the person's orientation. My reason for administering this is, again, this is one of the instruments that if someone wants to feign or fake, they can easily do that. For example, some of the questions are, what is the date? What is the day? Where are you? And Ethan answered all of those questions, indicating on that day that he was oriented times 3.
Let's move to the next one. You did a survey of stress symptoms. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Can you explain your findings?
So on this instrument, on the survey of stress symptoms, Ethan scored 39, indicating high levels of stress. And it was very clear to me that he was approaching it in a very honest, test-taking manner.
And can you describe some of the symptoms that this test addresses?
Certainly. Anxiety, depression, feeling overwhelmed, loneliness, intrusive thoughts, fatigue. All of those are elements that are present in this test that he endorsed.
Let's move to the next one, post-traumatic stress checklist for DSM-5. Can you explain what that is?
Sure, it's an instrument that is based on the DSM-5, which is the golden standard of diagnosing mental illness. And so his score of 57 places him in a very high stress category that meets their DSM criteria.
You then did the Beck Depression Inventory. Can you explain that to the court?
Sure, it's an instrument that assesses for depression, sadness, intrusive thoughts, malaise, and his score is 29, which is on the higher level, indicating very high levels of depression.
And again, you're performing these testings at least a year after he has become incarcerated, correct?
That is correct.
Let's look at the next one. It's the Burns Anxiety Inventory. Can you explain to the court what that is?
So that is a measure of one's anxiety, how anxious you are as a person. And as we know, anxiety has a direct effect on the brain. Ethan's score is 53, which is actually in the highest classification of anxiety.
And does that finding of high anxiety fit into all of the other evidence you were looking at? The journal, the text messaging between his friend, and what he self-reported to you?
That's correct.
Let's now look at the brief psychiatric rating scale. Can you explain what that is to the court and what your findings were?
Yeah, so this instrument looks at psychosis. And what is psychosis? Psychosis is a break from reality, as evidenced by auditory hallucinations and visual delusions. And he endorsed several of those items, indicating the presence of psychosis.
Okay. Let's now look at the Kaufman Brief Intelligent Test. Can you explain what that is and what your findings were?
Yes, the Kaufman Brief Intelligence Test is administered to test someone's level of intellectual functioning. The reason why I administered this instrument is I wanted to find out why was he failing in school. In my testing, if you have an intelligent person who is failing in the classroom, it's a signal that there is something going on. And when I administered this test, I saw that his verbal IQ was 104. So average, anything above 85 to about 100, 110 falls in the average range. So he has average verbal IQ, average nonverbal IQ, and overall average intelligence.
You then went on to perform the Wide Range Achievement Test. Can you explain what that is and what your findings were?
Certainly, in the state of Michigan, for special education testing, we administer the intelligence test, and 2 achievement tests. So I administered a wide range achievement test just to see if I missed anything in terms of his ability to function in their classroom. And except for math, most of his scores were average to high average. Again, that's how we know that there's something else going on with someone who has average intelligence.
Let's move on to the Weschler Individual Achievement Test. Can you explain what that is and what your findings were?
So that is the second of the 2 achievement tests, the RAP and the WIAP. Again, it's just to sort of double check your results. And again, the scores are consistent with someone who has the ability academically to function in the classroom, but wasn't.
Then finally, the Minnesota Multiphasic Personality Inventory. What is that and what were your results?
So that is, the MMPI is for, this one is for adolescents. It's regarded as the dean of tests to determine mental illness. This test has been validated across various measures, and it's a test that psychologists use. On the table to the left, that is his PSY score. His score is 81. Anything over 60 means that the person has a number of those symptoms
Of mental illness.
Mm-hmm. So his score is 81, indicating someone who has high degrees of paranoia and hallucinations. And then on the right, which is even more troubling, the table on the right, he has elevations above 60 in 2 key measures. One is OCD, obsessive compulsive, and anxiety. And I would love to explain what I mean by that.
If you could explain obsessive compulsive to the court.
So there is a part of the brain called the cingulate gyrus. It runs from the front of the brain to the back of the brain. That is the brain gear shifter. It allows us to shift from one thing to the next. In Ethan's case, someone who scores highly on this measure, what it tells me that this person does not have the ability to shut off those thoughts. It's like being stuck on. So you're with these thoughts every single day, every single night. And we see that with people who have OCD. He also has very high levels of anxiety, and those two tend to hang together. And as you notice in his journal, you notice that repetition, that the voices don't stop. My brain is on fire. Well, when I tested his brain, it's very consistent with what he was writing.
Okay. Does the obsessive compulsive disorder explain the constant searches on internet to look at violent things or to research things or any type of preparation and planning?
Yes, ma'am.
So let's move to the summary of the testing results that you performed. Do you believe that Ethan is a highly intelligent person?
I do.
Do you believe that he suffers from debilitating anxiety?
I do.
Do you believe that he is and was severely depressed?
I do.
Do you believe that he has features of obsessive compulsive disorder?
I do.
Were you able to determine that he was failing at school when, as you stated, he shouldn't have been?
I did.
And what exactly is your diagnosis for Ethan Crumbley?
So, major depressive disorder, in addition to psychosis, as evidenced by his verbalizing of hearing voices and seeing things. And by the way, about 12.5% of people with major depression experience major depression with psychosis.
You have now had an opportunity after turning in your report to review the records from Dr. Kadir. She is the physician from the Easter Seals. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Would you agree with me that you have similar findings, but not exactly the same?
That is correct.
Do you have an explanation for that?
Yeah, that is not unusual. Diagnosing mental illness is not an exact science, so you go based on symptoms. So Dr. Kadir, based on my review of her notation, diagnosed him with, I think, major depressive disorder and I think an adjustment disorder going on
With anxiety.
With anxiety, which is not unusual. But I believe as she continues, if she continues to treat him, once he has the depression and anxiety under control, if he's still verbalizing, hearing voices, and seeing things, then she may add that diagnosis. So it's not inconsistent.
Add the diagnosis of psychosis or something else?
Correct.
Of psychosis. Okay. So you have told us from your results that Ethan is of average, if not above average intelligence, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
So shouldn't he have known better? Shouldn't he have not done this because he's a smart kid?
So unfortunately, intelligence, and this is critical, intelligence does not protect someone from mental illness. So being very intelligent doesn't mean that you cannot be mentally ill.
Do you have
This guy's fairly interesting. He's got quite a bit to say. But ultimately, I'm glad he pled guilty.
any real world examples?
I do. Robin Williams, very intelligent Hollywood actor, but he was mentally ill. How do I know that? Well, he killed himself. He committed suicide. Twitch. We've seen that publicly. A very talented man on Ellen DeGeneres' show. Extremely talented. I actually watched a video of him the day before he killed himself. He was dancing with his wife and daughter. And then the next day he drove to a hotel and killed himself. Mental illness is real.
Were you able to watch any videos that were provided to you from body cam footage of Ethan at the jail?
I did.
Your Honor, I'm going to play what is in my exhibits as S body cam jail footage. There are a few videos, but we have shortened them. This is sound, so I don't know if we can have your staff just make sure the sound is perfect.
Why didn't you save her? Why didn't you save her? Save her, God.
Move to the next one.
You don't stop it. Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it? Why don't you stop it? Please stop it. 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 Why did you stop it, God? Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it, God? Why did you stop it? Why did you stop it? You let it happen. Why? I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Please, God. I'm sorry. Please, I'm not. I'm sorry, God. I'm sorry. I'm sorry, God.
What the hell? Why has he got like a what? This is not okay. WTF? What? Not impressed with this. What the mother? Take it off his freaking head. Yeah, trigger warning.
Stop pushing forward. God, stop, please, God.
I'm not liking this one frickin' bit.
Stop, stop, stop. God, stop. God, stop it, please. God, yes, stop it. I think, stop it. I love you. Stop it. Rifle back. Stop it. Yes, stop it. Yes, stop it. Stop it.
Oh my God, it's making me mad.
Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Let's lay back. Let's lay back. Stop it, God. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it.
So say that was the case. Can't they just cover the mouth instead of his whole freaking head? Like, this is really, really pissing me off.
Stop it. You can stop. Sit there. Stop it. Stop Oh God, you didn't stop it. Please tell me. Oh, no, you didn't stop it. You didn't stop it. Didn't stop it. You didn't stop
So the kid was basically left to his own devices his whole freaking life. He went and did what he did because he had shit ass freaking parents that didn't get him any help. And he gets into a place. Do you know what? Sedate him and put something over his freaking mouth. You don't have to make it. I mean, what the mother? That pisses me right off. I know what he did, and I get that. But what I'm personally seeing here right now pisses me right the mother F. Oh, my word, my word. I'll just shut up.
I count three, you're gonna sit down. 1, 2, 3. Calm. Time. Allow the everything. You don't stop the why don't you stop it? 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 Please stop it. Stop it, please stop it. Please stop it.
I have never seen anybody like this in my entire life. It makes me sick. Unless, hang on. I mean, unless you're dealing with a great big man, this is a 15-year-old freaking kid. Maybe 17 by this time, tops. I don't know. It just freaking amazes me. I would not want to see anybody that's having a mental health issue get treated like these assholes are treating this kid. I get what he did. I get it. He should be in jail for the rest of his life. He's a dangerous freaking kid. I get all that. But what I don't get is to see it's just like, what? I mean, he's look at his age, and he is mentally ill. This is not okay in my head. I'm sorry. I'm probably going to catch it for that, but it's not okay in my head. Makes me freaking sick to my stomach.
Why did you stop and you let it out? Me?
All right. Doctor, what did we just witness?
So we witnessed a child in the throes of psychosis. But we just witnessed someone who's saying, God, why didn't you stop it? And that's exactly how psychosis works. You engage in an action, and somehow you don't understand the outcome of the consequences. He's having a panic attack and a break with reality.
We also hear him saying, you could have saved her.
That is correct.
In any part of that video, do you see Ethan being violent?
No, ma'am.
Are mental health issues perfect? I mean, he's obviously been on medication now for a period of time, and things like this obviously can still happen. What is your explanation to that?
So medications are not an exact science. There's different levels of titration. There are times when some medications work, and there are times when they don't always work, just like in the physical realm.
I want to move on to part 5. So you were able to look at the events leading up to the shooting, correct?
That is correct.
All right. Did Ethan disclose to you a situation where he actually brought casings to school and displayed them on his desk?
He did.
Can you explain that?
Certainly, he indicated to me that he brought one live round, and actually my review of the records and with the detectives that interviewed some of the students, one of the students did confirm that Ethan showed him a live round and shell casings. So I have no reasons to doubt what he said, that he placed some shell casings on the desk in his class, and the teacher walked by, didn't name the teacher, and I said to him multiple times, are you sure? And he said yes.
You were made aware and you were able to see some interviews about the events of November 30th in the counseling office, correct?
That is correct.
Okay. And it was your understanding that he was caught looking at websites dealing with ammunition?
That is correct.
Okay. Were you able to look at the actual school assignment that was the cause of him being taken to the office that morning, where he wrote certain things and drew certain things?
That is correct.
Okay. Were you also able to discuss with Ethan the video that the court has been shown that was filmed the night before?
Yes, ma'am.
And you've had an opportunity to review that video?
I have.
Can you explain that video or give it some context?
So this was a night before the shooting when Ethan recorded himself, appeared to have been using a cell phone in terms of what he was planning to do the following day. And doing certain parts of the video, he made references to demons And then in the video, he said, "I am the demon." It just indicates the fragmentation in his head in terms of what was happening.
And what was your understanding about why he was outside at that point in time? What did he tell you had gone on in the home leading up to him being outside?
I think his parents had locked him out of the house, and they had taken some money from him.
Okay. And was that in relation to grades?
Yes, because he was failing some of his classes.
And how did he feel about that?
Terrible, in terms of how they were treating him.
The video that the court has viewed, and I know you have viewed, it seems just like a rambling of thoughts.
That is correct.
Okay.
Just sort of scrambled thoughts.
And do you believe that that is part of what mental illness can do to you?
Yes, ma'am.
Let's talk about the actual day of the shooting. Did Ethan ever tell you if he had been asked if he had a gun by any school professionals or the parents that day at school?
No.
And is it your understanding from speaking to Ethan that he was allowed to stay in school that day?
Yes, he was allowed to stay in school.
And can you explain the situation involving his backpack or how he explained it to you?
So this is how he explained it to me after he was called down to the office. He left his backpack in the classroom. And then he indicated that, I think it was Ejak. I could be butchering his name. I do apologize for that. Went to retrieve his backpack. And Ethan said, for the first time in his life, he felt relieved. He said he just knew that the sheriffs were going to burst into the office and arrest him because there was no way, after all that they saw, that they were not going to search that backpack. In fact, this is a comment he made that has stuck with me. He said one of the Hispanic students was suspected of using drugs, and he remembered them searching that kid's locker. And he felt fairly sure that they were going to search his backpack. When Ejak brought the backpack into the office, he made a comment. He said, "This is heavy. What do you have in here? Bricks?" And then Ethan said, all he had to do was just unzip that backpack, but he didn't.
So the best of your knowledge, after speaking with Ethan and reviewing all of the records, the backpack was not searched, correct?
It was not searched.
So obviously at that point, Ethan had the opportunity to volunteer the information that he had a weapon in his bag. Would you agree with me?
That is correct.
Can you explain why you believe that did not happen?
He was in a state of ambivalence. Do I tell? Do I not tell? Do I do this? Do I not do this? What is going to happen if I tell? So that's the state of flux that he was in.
So I want to kind of put it all together for the court. So you've told us about a complex childhood full of trauma, correct?
That is correct.
Violence in the home,
That is correct.
mental illness,
That is correct.
a lack of resources, no one's getting him the counseling that he needs,
That is correct.
neglect,
That is correct.
access to weapons,
That is correct.
in a school system with not enough counselors.
That
And
is
where did
correct.
that lead us?
Tragedy.
I want to move on to part 6. I know you've touched on quite a bit of this already. There's been testimony and there's been some argument about Ethan looking up or talking about going to prison. Is it normal that a 15-year-old would just be okay with the fact that he's going to do something that lands him in prison?
So teenagers go through a phase that is called personal failure. And if I may give you an example.
Sure.
A teenager may be driving 100 yards away, the light is about to turn red. They think that they can magically beat that red light and nothing bad is going to happen to them. It's because their brain, their prefrontal cortex, this is the brain supervisor, is not fully developed. Just biologically and physiologically, the human brain, the prefrontal cortex, is not developed until about age 24, 25. In Ethan's case, he has what is called arrested development.
Can you explain what that is?
Absolutely. So chronologically, he may have been 15 at the time, but given the high levels of stress and complex trauma, his age was much younger than his chronological age.
Okay. You've been able to see through the text messages and actually in your interviews with Ethan, he reported that he was not sleeping and he was not eating. How does that tie into mental illness?
So the brain consumes about 20 to 30% of the calories that we consume. So whatever we consume, the brain consumes about 20 to 30% of that. So sleep deprivation and lack of appropriate nutrition greatly impact the body. Our bodies were not meant to be in a state of high anxiety perpetually.
You've also been able to take a look at the Google searches that he was doing, and a lot of them are looking kind of for self-diagnosis, looking up what is depression. Do I have ADHD? Do I have obsessive compulsive disorder? What do you make of that?
So here is a child who was just trying to make sense of his inner world. He couldn't get help from his parents, from the home system. Couldn't get help from the school system. He couldn't get to a doctor. He couldn't get to a counselor. So his last resort was to try to figure out what's happening to me. Is this normal? Am I depressed? Am I anxious? Am I a sociopath? Who am I? He's trying to make sense of what's going on within him.
You've also been shown a number of searches that were done on a particular website where very violent videos, actual murders, actual shootings are categorized and people can view them. What is your understanding of what that does, especially to an adolescent's brain?
So during adolescence, the person's brain is still in the formative stage. The neurons are still trying to connect. And if one spends an inordinate amount of time ingesting that type of content without supervision, before long, it's natural to lose sight of what is real and what is not real.
Now, you've been made aware that there was a situation at the jail with a password and a tablet, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And can you explain what you believe to have happened in this situation?
Certainly. So Ethan was given a tablet, and because he's a fairly intelligent person, he was able to figure out the password and was able to go on the internet and use his tablet. And what he indicated to me is that although he had the urge to go to the live gore site, he was able to restrain himself which he's pretty proud of. 2 weeks, just did not go to the site, but he eventually went there.
And what does that, can you give that a context? What does that mean to you? Is he regressing? What, can you give an explanation to that?
So when you make a comparison of what he was doing prior, he was ingesting that content constantly, every day, hours and hours at a time. And in my mind, it shows progress, not perfection, but progress.
Were you able to view the videos of Ethan killing baby birds?
I did.
Can you discuss the significance of that and what you think and how you think it fits into this case and his diagnosis?
Absolutely. I observed Ethan torturing baby birds. He wanted them to feel the pain that he was feeling inside. And I observed his persona. He was actually speaking to them in a different tone of voice, almost as a parent talking to a child. It's just a reflection of his mental impairment.
What about, he talks about a desire to kill, or he wants to find another set of baby birds so that he can kill them. Can you explain that?
It sort of lines up with my testing of his brain. I indicated that his obsessive compulsive scales, I think the score is 801, indicating that this part of the brain, the cingulate gyrus, is on fire, meaning that it's hard to turn it off, and without appropriate intervention, without treatment and medications, that part of the brain is stuck on.
What about the fact that when the police come in, Ethan surrenders, and then in the police car acts normal? I mean, he's not talking to voices, he's not flailing about. Can you explain that?
Certainly, it's a phase called tension reduction. So tension is something that is built up. Anxiety, obsession, anxiety, obsession. I guess a good analogy is to think in terms of like a pressure cooker. It's on the stove and it's boiling, and there's tension building up in there. And the one way for that tension to go away is when you release that knob, the tension goes out and you revert to equilibrium. So tension reduction cycle.
So is your explanation then, once he carried out this plan that he was so fixated on, he had that sense of reduction or accomplishment?
Absolutely. It's analogous to what we just witnessed. So the person in the videos is the same person in the courtroom. There's no difference. It is the same person.
I want to talk about the report that you authored. Obviously, in giving the history that you did, you've been doing these regular types of analysis outside of the courtroom for many years. You would agree with me?
That is correct.
Okay. So how is it that you came to start doing the work that you're doing now for Miller hearings?
We were so in, I think it was around 2019, an attorney reached out to me and asked me if I would do one of the Miller hearings.
Mm-hmm.
And I was fairly confident in my ability as a psychologist, in my ability to clinically interview someone, in my ability to test someone. But in terms of crafting a legal report, I was a neophyte. it was not my area of expertise. And so I reached out to the attorney and said that if I'm to do this report, I'm going to need you to reach out to your sources, obtain copies of their report, make sure you get their permission, because I plan to use the rubric and extract some of the legal language in my report. And that is 2019 to 25 clients ago. And that is the exact format that I've been using.
And that's what you did in this case?
Yes, ma'am.
Were you able to form an opinion whether or not Ethan Crumbley was mentally ill on November 30th of 2021?
Yes, ma'am.
And what is that?
He has major depressive disorder with psychosis, anxiety, and features of obsessive compulsive disorder. He is mentally ill.
And in all of the testing that you did and the interviews, do you believe that there is the possibility of rehabilitation?
I do.
And can you explain that?
Certainly. As I indicated, I've worked in the field of brain injury for 25 years. I take pride in my work. I've treated people with stroke, CVA. I've treated people with anoxic brain injury, and I've treated people with mental health. And along with my team, we've been able to rehabilitate people. A number of my clients have had issues with the law, and through psychotherapy and support, they've made progress. Additionally, and this is important, in neuroscience, there is something called neuroplasticity. And that is the ability of the brain to create new pathways, to generate new neurons. You see this in stroke victims.
Mhm.
It's a stroke on the left-hand side, it's right-hand side neglect. But those are the people that I've worked with and taught them how to speak again and how to walk again and how to function. So absolutely yes.
So people with mental illness, especially ones that do something, extremely serious that leads them down a path that they find themselves in prison. I know Dr. Keating touched on this a little bit, but you believe that, especially based on Ethan's age, that his brain can rewire and he can stop the behaviors that he was exhibiting previously. Is that correct?
That is correct. Ethan's brain is still maturing, and his brain probably will not reach full maturity for another 10 years.
Are the clinical opinions in your report based solely on the testing and your interaction with Ethan Crumbley that you yourself performed?
So my conclusions are based on my clinical interview of Ethan Crumbley and are based on the results from my testing.
I have no further questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Cross.
Your Honor, the doctor's actually testified to a whole lot of things that are not in his report. And could we take a short break before cross-examination?
Sure. We'll go ahead and take about a 10-minute break. Deputies, if you could, go ahead and take the defendant back downstairs. To those in the gallery, please be seated until the defendant has exited the room.
What the hell? Oh my God. Oh my God. What the hell is going on? Hello, James. We're just finishing up here. I went through my double mute session. What the hell did I click? Did I miss it? What? I don't know. It's Friday. It's Friday. So yeah, that was 11. So we're going to finish 12 and 13 this weekend and then look at the 5-hour victims impact statements. There you go. Of course. Oh my goodness. So I have some running around to do. So I'm going to call it the end of this stream, friends. Sorry we didn't yeah. Sorry we missed you, JJ, but I'll probably do something later this afternoon. With that said, thank you very much for being here with me. I just about had a freak out when I seen them, that kid with that thing over his head. It just freaked me right out. I've never seen anything like that in my entire life. Never. It's like, oh my God, take that thing off. Don't they have things that they can cover their mouths if they want to spit or bite? Do they have to put one of those freaking, oh my Lord, someone put that over my head, I would lose my ish. They would have to double up on the knockout stuff because I'd lose my ish. I would. Just saying. So I'll do my best to keep myself out of that position. Okay, guys. Thanks again for being here. I love you as much. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.